Maria Santos pushed her mop bucket down the long hallway of the military base, water sloshing gently with each step. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform was the same gray as every other cleaning worker. To everyone who passed by, she was invisible. Just another janitor doing her job. The soldiers walked past her without a second glance. Officers discussed classified missions right in front of her, as if she couldn't hear or understand. They treated her like furniture, something that belonged in the background. Maria had grown used to this treatment over the past 6 months since she started working at Fort Harrison. She kept her head down and focused on her work. Mop the floors, empty the trash, clean the windows. Simple tasks that required no special skills, or so everyone believed. The other cleaning staff chatted among themselves, but Maria mostly stayed quiet. She had learned long ago that it was safer to remain unnoticed. The base was huge, with endless corridors connecting different departments. Maria had access to almost every area because cleanliness was needed everywhere. She mopped the floors in the communications room, wiped down desks in intelligence offices, and cleaned bathrooms used by high-ranking officials. Her keycard opened doors that many soldiers couldn't access. During her lunch break, Maria sat alone in the staff room. She ate her simple sandwich while listening to the other workers complain about their supervisors or gossip about their families. Sometimes she would catch bits of conversation from soldiers who thought she didn't speak good English. They were wrong about that, just like they were wrong about many other things. The work was physically demanding, but Maria never complained. She arrived early every morning and left late every evening. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, appreciated her dedication, but didn't ask many questions about her background. The application process had been surprisingly easy. They needed workers, and Maria needed a job. As the weeks passed, Maria learned the routines of the base. She knew which officers liked their coffee black and which ones stayed late working on important projects. She memorized the schedules of security patrols and noticed which areas had the best surveillance coverage. Information had a way of reaching her ears when people assumed she wasn't paying attention. One evening, while cleaning the main office building, Maria overheard 2 colonels discussing a problem with their intelligence operations. They were having trouble getting reliable information from certain overseas locations. Their usual methods weren't working, and they needed someone with specific skills and connections. Maria continued mopping, but her ears were focused on every word. The colonels walked away, leaving behind empty coffee cups and crumpled papers. Maria cleaned up after them as she always did, but something had changed inside her. The conversation had awakened memories she had tried to bury. Memories of a different life, a different identity, a different purpose. That night, Maria looked at herself in the bathroom mirror of her small apartment. She touched the high collar of her work shirt, feeling the edge of something hidden underneath. For 6 months, she had kept it covered, kept it secret. The tattoo on her neck was small but significant. It told a story that no one at the base knew. She had come to Fort Harrison to disappear, to start over, to leave her past behind. The job as a cleaning woman was perfect cover. Nobody looked twice at someone pushing a mop bucket. Nobody asked difficult questions or ran extensive background checks on janitors. She could hide in plain sight. But now, listening to those officers, Maria realized that her past might not be as buried as she hoped. The skills she had spent years developing, the training she had received, the connections she had made, they were all still there, waiting beneath the surface. She had tried to become ordinary, but perhaps ordinary was not her destiny. The next morning, Maria arrived at work as usual. She collected her cleaning supplies and began her rounds. But something was different. She found herself paying closer attention to conversations, noting security weaknesses and remembering details that might be important later. Her instincts were waking up. As she mopped the floor outside the commander's office, Maria heard raised voices inside. There was frustration, anger, and desperation in those voices. Whatever problem they were discussing, it was serious. She finished cleaning and moved on, but the tension in that room stayed with her. Later that day, while emptying trash bins in the intelligence wing, Maria noticed unusual activity. People were working late, phones were ringing constantly, and there was an urgency in the air that hadn't been there before. Something big was happening, something that required immediate attention. Maria went home that evening with her mind racing. She prepared her simple dinner and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. For months she had lived quietly, keeping to herself, avoiding anything that might draw attention. But the conversations she had overheard suggested that the base was facing a crisis that required exactly the kind of expertise she possessed. She touched her neck again, feeling the hidden tattoo. It was a symbol from her previous life, a mark that identified her as someone special, someone with unique abilities and connections. She had covered it carefully every day, wearing high-collared shirts and keeping her hair down to hide any glimpse of the ink. The tattoo was small, just 2 inches of intricate design, but it represented years of training, dangerous missions, and a network of contacts around the world. It was the mark of an operative who had served her country in ways that most people could never imagine. But that life had ended badly, forcing her to disappear and start over. Now, as Maria sat in her quiet apartment, she wondered if it was time to stop hiding. The base needed help, and she had the skills to provide it. But revealing herself would mean giving up the safety of anonymity. It would mean stepping back into a world she had tried to leave behind. The decision wasn't easy, but the sounds of frustration and desperation from the commander's office echoed in her mind. Tomorrow she would continue cleaning floors and emptying trash bins, but she would also be watching, listening, and preparing for the moment when someone might finally notice that the ordinary woman with the mop was anything but ordinary. Commander James Mitchell had been running Fort Harrison for 3 years, and he prided himself on noticing details that others missed. It was this attention to detail that had earned him his position and kept the base running smoothly. But lately his focus was consumed by a growing crisis that threatened to become a disaster. The intelligence reports on his desk painted a grim picture. 3 American operatives had gone missing in Eastern Europe, and all attempts to locate them had failed. The usual diplomatic channels were blocked, local contacts had gone silent, and satellite surveillance was proving useless. Time was running out, and Mitchell knew that each passing day reduced the chances of bringing his people home alive. He stood by his office window, watching the daily activities of the base below. Soldiers went about their routines, vehicles moved in and out of the gates, and support staff continued their work. Everything looked normal on the surface, but Mitchell carried the weight of knowing that 3 families were waiting for news about their loved ones. His assistant knocked and entered with another stack of reports. Mitchell scanned them quickly, hoping for a breakthrough, but found only more dead ends. The missing operatives had been working on gathering intelligence about arms trafficking networks when they disappeared. Their last communication had been a routine check-in and then nothing. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was General Patterson from the Pentagon, calling for the daily update. Mitchell had to admit once again that there was no progress. The general's frustration was clear in his voice, and the pressure from Washington was increasing. Political considerations were starting to influence military decisions, which never led to good outcomes. After hanging up, Mitchell called a meeting with his senior staff. They gathered in the secure conference room, and he could see the stress on their faces. Colonel Stevens from Intelligence looked particularly worn down. They had exhausted their traditional resources and were running out of options. Colonel Stevens presented his latest analysis. The missing operatives had been investigating a network that stretched across multiple countries. The criminals involved were sophisticated and well-connected, with ties to both organized crime and corrupt government officials. Breaking into this network would require someone with specific language skills, cultural knowledge, and the ability to move through dangerous territory without arousing suspicion. Major Thompson from Operations suggested using more conventional military assets, but Mitchell knew that approach would likely result in an international incident. They needed finesse, not force. They needed someone who could blend in, gather information, and extract the operatives without creating a diplomatic crisis. The meeting continued for 2 hours, but produced no viable solutions. Mitchell dismissed his staff and remained alone in the conference room, staring at the map on the wall. Red pins marked the last known locations of his missing people, while blue pins showed the positions of friendly assets. There was a large gap between them, a dangerous no-man's land where traditional military operations couldn't reach. That evening, Mitchell decided to walk through the base instead of driving to his quarters. He often did this when he needed to think, finding that the familiar sights and sounds helped clear his mind. The base was quieter at night, with only essential personnel on duty and the cleaning crews working in the buildings. As he passed the main administration building, Mitchell noticed a cleaning woman working late. She was methodically mopping the hallway, moving with efficient precision. He had seen her before during his evening walks, always working diligently and professionally. There was something about her that seemed different from the other support staff, though he couldn't quite identify what it was. Mitchell paused to watch her work. She moved with a certain awareness, keeping track of her surroundings while focusing on her task. When she reached for supplies in her cart, her movements were economical and purposeful. These were small things, barely noticeable, but Mitchell's training had taught him to observe human behavior carefully. The woman looked up and saw him watching. Instead of the nervous reaction he might have expected from a civilian employee encountering a high-ranking officer, she made brief eye contact and nodded respectfully before returning to her work. There was no fear or intimidation in her manner, just professional acknowledgement. Mitchell continued his walk, but his mind kept returning to the cleaning woman. Something about her reminded him of people he had worked with in special operations. It was difficult to explain, but experienced operators developed a certain way of moving and observing that was hard to disguise, even when they were trying to blend in. The next morning, Mitchell found himself paying more attention to the support staff as he moved through the base. He noticed the cleaning woman again, this time working in the intelligence wing. She was emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces, but Mitchell observed how she positioned herself to avoid blocking exits, and how her eyes briefly scanned documents left on desks before moving on. During lunch, Mitchell casually asked his adjutant about the base's civilian employees. The conversation revealed that the cleaning staff underwent basic background checks but nothing extensive. They were considered low-risk positions with limited access to sensitive information. Mitchell made a mental note to review these procedures, but something else was bothering him. That afternoon, while reviewing personnel files in his office, Mitchell heard a commotion in the hallway. He opened his door to find that a water pipe had burst, flooding part of the corridor. The maintenance crew was scrambling to shut off the water and assess the damage. In the chaos, he noticed the cleaning woman again. While others were either panicking or standing around helplessly, she had quickly moved to protect sensitive equipment from water damage. She knew exactly which items were important and how to handle them safely. Her actions showed familiarity with military equipment and procedures that went beyond what a civilian cleaner should possess. Mitchell watched as she efficiently helped coordinate the cleanup effort, giving subtle guidance to the maintenance crew without overstepping her apparent authority. She demonstrated knowledge of the building's layout and systems that suggested she had studied them carefully. When the immediate crisis was over, she quietly returned to her normal duties as if nothing unusual had happened. That evening, Mitchell requested the personnel file for Maria Santos, the cleaning woman who had caught his attention. The file was surprisingly thin. Basic personal information, a local address, previous employment at other cleaning companies, and character references that checked out but revealed little about her background. Her application photo showed a plain-looking woman with no distinguishing features. Something felt wrong about the file. It was too clean, too simple, too ordinary. In Mitchell's experience, everyone had complications in their background: family issues, financial problems, employment gaps, or educational inconsistencies. Maria Santos appeared to have none of these normal human complexities. Mitchell decided to conduct his own discreet observation. Over the next few days, he made excuses to walk through areas where she was working. He watched her interact with other staff, noting how she listened more than she spoke and how she seemed to understand conversations in languages other than English. When technical terms were used around her, she showed subtle signs of recognition that suggested military or intelligence training. The breakthrough came during a staff meeting about the missing operatives. Colonel Stevens was explaining the linguistic and cultural challenges they faced in the target region. He mentioned the need for someone who understood the local dialects and customs, someone who could navigate complex political relationships and identify trustworthy contacts. As Stevens spoke, Mitchell found himself thinking about the cleaning woman again. Her behavior patterns, her situational awareness, her unexplained competencies, they all suggested someone with extensive training and experience. But if she was hiding her true background, why had she chosen to work as a janitor on a military base? The answer came to him suddenly. What better place to hide than in plain sight? A military base was one of the few locations where someone with intelligence training might feel comfortable, where the routines and security measures would seem familiar rather than threatening. And a cleaning position provided access to almost every area of the facility without raising suspicions. Mitchell made a decision that would either solve his current crisis or create an entirely new set of problems. He was going to find out who Maria Santos really was, and whether the unassuming woman with the mop might be the key to bringing his missing operatives home safely. Maria sensed the change before she could identify it. After years of operating in hostile environments, she had developed an instinct for when she was being watched. The feeling had started 3 days ago and was growing stronger each time she encountered Commander Mitchell during her cleaning rounds. She continued her work with practiced normalcy, but her mind was analyzing every interaction, the commander's questions to other staff members, his unexpected appearances in areas where she was working, his careful observation of her reactions, all signs that her cover might be compromised. Maria had hoped to remain invisible for much longer, but military commanders didn't reach their positions without developing sharp instincts. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had chosen Fort Harrison specifically because it seemed like the perfect place to disappear. Military bases were structured environments where everyone had clearly defined roles and responsibilities. A cleaning woman was expected to be invisible, to blend into the background while performing essential but unremarkable tasks. For 6 months, the strategy had worked perfectly, but now, as Maria emptied trash bins in the communications center, she could feel the weight of scrutiny. She had noticed increased activity around the base lately, more late-night meetings, urgent phone calls, and the kind of tension that indicated a serious operational problem. Her trained ear had picked up fragments of conversations about missing personnel and failed rescue attempts. The professional part of her mind automatically began analyzing the situation. Missing operatives in Eastern Europe, blocked diplomatic channels, failed intelligence gathering efforts. It was exactly the kind of complex problem that had once been her specialty. But Maria Santos, the cleaning woman, was supposed to know nothing about such matters. During her lunch break, Maria sat in the staff cafeteria and observed the subtle signs of stress among the military personnel. Officers who usually maintained calm demeanors showed fatigue and frustration. Support staff whispered about increased security measures and canceled leave requests. The entire base was feeling the pressure of an unresolved crisis. Maria finished her sandwich and returned to work, but her mind was racing. She had built her new identity carefully, creating a background that would withstand casual scrutiny while avoiding anything that might trigger deeper investigation. Maria Santos was a recent immigrant with limited English skills, previous employment in manual labor, and no family connections that could be easily verified. The real Maria Santos had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving behind just enough documentation to build a new identity. It was a common technique among people who needed to disappear completely. But she knew that if Commander Mitchell decided to dig deeper, even the best false identity had vulnerabilities. That afternoon, while cleaning the executive wing, Maria overheard a heated discussion between Mitchell and his senior staff. They were running out of time and options. The missing operatives had been gone for 10 days, and intelligence suggested they were being moved to a location where rescue would be impossible. Political pressure from Washington was mounting, and there were threats of unauthorized military action that could destabilize the entire region. Maria continued working, but every word of the conversation was being recorded in her memory. She recognized the tactical challenges they were facing and knew exactly what kind of expertise would be needed to resolve the situation. It was frustrating to possess the knowledge and skills that could help while being trapped in a role that prevented her from acting. As evening approached, Maria completed her assigned areas and prepared to leave for the day. She was walking toward the exit when she noticed Commander Mitchell approaching from the opposite direction. Instead of the casual nod she usually received, he stopped directly in front of her. "Ms. Santos, could I speak with you for a moment?" His voice was polite but carried unmistakable authority. Maria's heart rate increased slightly, but she maintained her calm exterior. "Of course, sir. Is there a problem with my work?" Mitchell gestured toward a quiet area near the main entrance. "Not at all. Your work has been excellent. I was just curious about your background. Have you always worked in cleaning services?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Maria recognized it as the opening move in what could become a much more serious interrogation. She had prepared for this possibility and had a cover story ready. Yes, sir. I work cleaning jobs since I come to America 3 years ago. Is good work steady pay? She deliberately emphasized her accent and kept her grammar simple, maintaining the image of someone with limited education and language skills. Mitchell nodded thoughtfully. Where did you work before coming to the base? Different places. Office buildings, hospitals, shopping centers. I have references if you need to check. Maria knew that her false employment history would hold up under basic verification, but she also knew that military intelligence had resources that could dig much deeper if they chose to use them. That won't be necessary, Mitchell said, but his eyes were studying her face carefully. I've noticed that you're very observant, very professional in your work. Have you ever considered other types of employment? The question was clearly a test, designed to gauge her reaction and gather information about her true capabilities. Maria maintained her confused expression while her mind raced through possible responses. I don't understand, sir. What other work? I only know cleaning. She tilted her head slightly as if genuinely puzzled by the suggestion. Mitchell was quiet for a moment and Maria could sense him weighing his next words carefully. Sometimes people have skills they don't talk about. Sometimes they've done jobs that weren't on their official resume. The conversation was moving into dangerous territory. Maria realized that Mitchell suspected something but wasn't sure what. She could continue playing the role of confused immigrant, or she could take a calculated risk that might either resolve the situation or make it much worse. Sir, I think maybe you confuse me with someone else. I am just cleaning, lady. I mop floors, empty trash, clean windows. Nothing more. She kept her voice steady but allowed a hint of nervousness to show, as any normal civilian employee might when questioned by a high-ranking officer. Mitchell studied her for several more seconds, then nodded slowly. Of course. I apologize for the confusion. You do excellent work and we appreciate your dedication to the base. Thank you, sir. Maria bobbed her head respectfully and began to move toward the exit. Ms. Santos? Mitchell's voice stopped her. If you ever remember anything unusual that you've seen or heard around the base, anything that seemed out of place, please don't hesitate to report it. Sometimes the smallest details can be important. The request seemed routine, the kind of security reminder that all base personnel received regularly, but Maria understood the subtext. Mitchell was giving her an opening, a way to share information without revealing how she had obtained it. He was also testing whether she would admit to understanding more than she pretended. Yes, sir. I will remember. Maria continued toward the exit, feeling Mitchell's eyes on her back. Once outside the building, Maria walked to her car at a normal pace, resisting the urge to hurry. She knew that Mitchell might be watching from his office window, and any sign of unusual behavior would confirm his suspicions. But inside, her mind was already working through the implications of the conversation. Mitchell was clearly intelligent and experienced. His questions had been carefully crafted to probe her background without making direct accusations. He suspected that she was more than she appeared to be, but he didn't yet know what that meant. The fact that he was investigating her personally, rather than turning the matter over to security personnel, suggested that he was either very cautious or that he needed something from her. As Maria drove to her apartment, she considered her options. She could disappear tonight, activate one of her alternate identities and be in another state by morning. It was the safest choice, the one that would preserve her carefully constructed new life. But leaving would also mean abandoning 3 American operatives who were in desperate need of help. It would mean watching from the sidelines while a military operation failed because of problems she knew how to solve. For 6 months, she had successfully buried her old life and the sense of duty that had once driven her. But Commander Mitchell's investigation was awakening something she had tried to forget. That night, Maria stood in front of her bathroom mirror and slowly unbuttoned her high-collared shirt. The tattoo on her neck was small but intricate, a coiled serpent wrapped around a dagger with tiny letters in a language that few people could read. It was the mark of an elite unit that officially didn't exist, a symbol that identified her as one of the most highly trained operatives her country had ever produced. She had earned this tattoo through years of dangerous missions in some of the world's most hostile environments. She spoke 7 languages, could disappear into any culture, and had extraction skills that were legendary among those who knew about such things. But all of that expertise had come with a price that eventually became too high to pay. Maria rebuttoned her shirt and went to bed, but sleep was elusive. Tomorrow she would have to decide whether to continue hiding or to risk everything by revealing who she really was. The choice would determine not only her own fate, but possibly the lives of 3 missing operatives who were running out of time. Commander Mitchell spent a sleepless night analyzing his conversation with Maria Santos. Every instinct told him that the woman was hiding something significant, but he needed proof before taking any action. Military commanders couldn't operate on hunches alone, especially when dealing with civilian personnel who had rights and protections under federal law. At dawn, Mitchell made a decision that would either solve his problems or create new ones. He placed a secure call to Colonel Sarah Chen at the Defense Intelligence Agency, an old friend who specialized in personnel investigations. If Maria Santos was more than she appeared, Chen would be able to find out. "James, it's been too long," Chen said when the call connected. "What can I do for you?" Mitchell explained the situation carefully, emphasizing his operational needs rather than his suspicions about the cleaning woman. He needed Chen to investigate Maria Santos without alerting anyone else to his interest in a civilian employee. "Send me everything you have on her," Chen said. "I'll run a comprehensive background check and see what emerges. But James, be careful. If this woman is trained intelligence, there could be reasons she's hiding. Not all of them are friendly." The warning stuck with Mitchell as he went about his morning routine. He had considered the possibility that Maria might be working for a foreign government, using her position to gather intelligence about American military operations. But her behavior didn't match the profile of a hostile operative. She seemed to be hiding from something rather than actively working against American interests. Meanwhile, Maria arrived at work knowing that her time was running out. The conversation with Mitchell had been a clear warning that her cover was being investigated. She had perhaps 24 hours before her true identity was discovered, and then she would have to make a choice that would change everything. She began her cleaning rounds as usual, but today she paid careful attention to the discussions happening around her. The crisis with the missing operatives was escalating rapidly. She overheard Colonel Stevens telling another officer that they had received intelligence suggesting the operatives were being prepared for transport to a facility in the mountains, where rescue would be virtually impossible. Maria knew those mountains. She had operated in that region 5 years ago, during a mission that had nearly cost her life. The terrain was brutal, the local population was hostile to outsiders, and the criminal networks were sophisticated and well-armed. A conventional military rescue operation would fail, and probably result in the deaths of both the missing operatives and their would-be rescuers. During her lunch break, Maria made a decision that surprised her. Instead of eating in the staff cafeteria, she walked to the base library and used one of the public computers to research the current situation in Eastern Europe. The news reports were carefully sanitized, but Maria could read between the lines. The missing operatives had stumbled onto something big, something that involved high-level corruption and international criminal networks. As she read, Maria felt the familiar stirring of professional interest. This was exactly the kind of complex, multi-layered problem that had once energized her. The challenge of penetrating hostile territory, identifying reliable local contacts, and extracting American personnel from seemingly impossible situations. It was what she had been trained to do. But Maria Santos, the cleaning woman, wasn't supposed to know anything about international operations or extraction techniques. She was supposed to care only about mop buckets and trash bins, about earning enough money to pay rent on her small apartment. The conflict between her true identity and her assumed role was becoming unbearable. That afternoon, Mitchell called another meeting with his senior staff. The pressure from Washington had increased overnight, and there were discussions about launching a military operation that everyone knew would likely fail. The political leadership was running out of patience, and military leaders were being asked to attempt an impossible mission to satisfy domestic political concerns. Colonel Stevens presented the latest intelligence about the missing operatives' location. They were being held in a compound that was heavily guarded and surrounded by hostile territory. The local government was either unable or unwilling to provide assistance, and attempts to work through diplomatic channels had been blocked by corruption at the highest levels. Major Thompson outlined a proposed rescue operation, that would involve helicopter insertion of special forces teams. The plan was professionally prepared but fundamentally flawed. The insertion zones were too far from the target, the extraction routes were compromised, and the operation would require cooperation from local assets that didn't exist. Mitchell listened to the presentations with growing frustration. His people were proposing solutions that might work in a perfect world, but the real world was messy and complicated. They needed someone who understood the local culture, someone who had contacts in the region, someone who could operate independently without requiring massive military support. After dismissing his staff, Mitchell remained in the conference room, staring at the maps and satellite photos spread across the table. Somewhere in those images were 3 American operatives who were counting on him to bring them home. He had the best military resources in the world at his disposal, but none of them seemed adequate for this particular challenge. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. His adjutant entered to report that Colonel Chen from the Defense Intelligence Agency was on a secure line with preliminary results from her investigation of Maria Santos. "James, this is interesting," Chen said when Mitchell took the call. "Your cleaning woman doesn't exist. The Maria Santos identity is sophisticated but false. It was created by someone with access to high-level resources and expertise in creating deep cover identities." Mitchell felt his pulse quicken. "Any idea who she really is?" "Not yet, but I'm seeing patterns that suggest intelligence background. The identity was created using techniques that only a few organizations possess. I'm running the biometric data through classified databases now, but it will take time to get results." "How much time?"
12 to 18 hours for a complete analysis.
"But James, there's something else. Whoever created this identity went to extraordinary lengths to make it believable. This wasn't done quickly or cheaply. Someone invested serious resources in helping this woman disappear." After hanging up, Mitchell sat quietly for several minutes, processing the implications. Maria Santos was definitely not who she claimed to be, but the sophistication of her false identity suggested that she wasn't a typical foreign operative either. Someone with significant resources had helped her create a new life, which raised questions about why she needed to disappear and whether she might be willing to help with his current crisis. Mitchell made another decision that defied standard protocol. Instead of turning the investigation over to base security, he decided to confront Maria directly. It was risky, but time was running out for the missing operatives and conventional approaches weren't working. He found Maria cleaning windows in the administration building. She was working methodically, but he noticed that she positioned herself to observe the parking lot and entrance areas. Exactly what a trained operative would do to maintain situational awareness. "Ms. Santos, could I speak with you privately?" Mitchell kept his voice calm and non-threatening. Maria looked up from her work, and for just a moment Mitchell saw something different in her eyes. Instead of the mild confusion of a civilian employee, there was sharp intelligence and careful evaluation. It was the look of someone assessing a potential threat and calculating response options. "Of course, sir." Maria set down her cleaning supplies and followed Mitchell to a small conference room. Mitchell closed the door and gestured for her to sit. "I'm going to be direct with you. We both know that you're not really a cleaning woman. Your background is false, your identity is constructed, and your behavior indicates advanced training." Maria maintained her confused expression, but Mitchell could see her mind working behind her eyes. "I don't know what you're running from, and I don't care," Mitchell continued. "But I have 3 American operatives who are going to die unless someone with very specific skills can help me get them out. I think you might be that someone." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Maria seemed to be weighing her options, calculating risks and benefits. Finally, she reached up and slowly unbuttoned the top of her shirt, revealing a small but intricate tattoo on her neck. "You're right," she said, and her voice was completely different. No accent, no hesitation, just calm professionalism. "My name is not Maria Santos, and I am not a cleaning woman. But before we go any further, I need to know exactly what you're asking me to do and what guarantees you can provide about my safety and legal status." The transformation was remarkable. In the space of a few sentences, Maria Santos, the humble cleaning woman, had disappeared, replaced by someone who radiated quiet competence and controlled power. She sat across from Commander Mitchell with perfect posture, her eyes alert and focused, every movement deliberate and economical. My real name is Alexandra Petrov, she said, rebuttoning her shirt to cover the tattoo. I was a senior operative with a unit that doesn't officially exist, specializing in deep cover operations and personnel extraction in hostile environments. I've been off the grid for 18 months and I'd prefer to keep it that way. Mitchell absorbed this information while studying her face. The accent was completely gone, replaced by educated, articulate English with just a hint of something that might have been Eastern European. Her entire demeanor had changed, as if she had been wearing an elaborate costume that she could now remove. "Why are you hiding?" Mitchell asked directly. Alexandra was quiet for a moment, considering how much to reveal. "My last operation went wrong. People died who shouldn't have, and I discovered that someone in my own organization had sold information to the enemy. When I tried to report it through official channels, I was told to keep quiet. When I refused, I became a liability. So you disappeared. It seemed preferable to having an accident." Alexandra's voice was matter-of-fact, but Mitchell heard the underlying tension. "I created the Maria Santos identity and found work that would let me stay invisible while I figured out my next move. Your base seemed like a safe place to hide." Mitchell leaned back in his chair, processing the implications. He had suspected that Maria was trained intelligence, but he hadn't expected someone with her apparent level of expertise. The unit she described sounded like one of the most classified programs in the American intelligence community. "Tell me about your experience in Eastern Europe," Mitchell said. Alexandra's eyes sharpened. "You've done your homework." "Yes, I've operated extensively in that region. I speak the languages, understand the cultural dynamics, and have contacts throughout the criminal and intelligence networks." "I'm guessing that's why we're having this conversation." Mitchell nodded and briefly explained the situation with the missing operatives. As he spoke, he watched Alexandra's face, noting how she absorbed details and asked precise professional questions. When he finished, she was quiet for several minutes, clearly analyzing the tactical challenges. "The area where they're being held is extremely difficult," she finally said. "The local government is compromised, the terrain favors defenders, and the criminal networks have extensive early warning systems. A conventional military rescue would fail and probably result in the deaths of everyone involved. What would you recommend?" Alexandra stood and moved to the wall map, studying the marked locations. Getting them out would require someone who could move through the region without attracting attention, someone who could identify and approach the right local contacts, and someone with the technical skills to disable security systems and coordinate an extraction. "Someone like you. Someone exactly like me." Alexandra turned to face Mitchell directly. "But before we discuss this further, I need to understand what you're offering and what you expect in return." Mitchell had been preparing for this moment since he first suspected her true identity. "I can offer you official reinstatement under a new identity, full legal protection, and a clean slate with the intelligence community. In exchange, you help me get my people out." Alexandra laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You can't promise any of that. You're a base commander, not the director of national intelligence. The people who want me dead have more influence than you do." "Maybe," Mitchell admitted. "But I have something they don't have. 3 missing operatives and a crisis that's about to become a political disaster. Success in this operation would give us significant leverage with the people who matter in Washington." Alexandra walked to the window and looked out at the base, where soldiers and support staff went about their daily routines. For 6 months she had watched this world from the outside, pretending to be someone she wasn't. The offer to return to her real life was tempting, but she knew better than most how dangerous it was to trust promises made by desperate commanders. "There's another problem," she said without turning around. "The missing operatives stumbled onto something bigger than arms trafficking. I've been monitoring the intelligence chatter, and there are indications that this network is involved in moving strategic materials, things that could be used for weapons of mass destruction." Mitchell felt a chill run down his spine. "How do you know this?" "Because I recognize the operational patterns. This is the same network I was investigating when my last mission went wrong. The same network that my own people told me to ignore." Alexandra turned back to face him. "If I'm right, then your missing operatives aren't just in danger. They're sitting on information that could prevent a major terrorist attack." The implications hit Mitchell like a physical blow. What had seemed like a straightforward personnel recovery mission was potentially something much larger and more dangerous. If Alexandra was correct, then the stakes had just increased dramatically. "What aren't you telling me?" Mitchell asked. Alexandra was quiet for a long moment, weighing her words carefully. "The reason I went into hiding wasn't just because I reported corruption. It was because I discovered evidence that someone high up in the American intelligence community was actively protecting this network. When I tried to expose them, they tried to kill me." "Who?" "I never found out. The operation was compartmentalized, and the evidence was destroyed before I could act on it. But whoever it was had access to our mission details, our safe houses, and our extraction protocols. They knew exactly where we would be and when." Mitchell absorbed this information while calculating the risks. If Alexandra was telling the truth, then rescuing the missing operatives could expose them both to retaliation from within their own government. But if they did nothing, 3 American lives would be lost and potentially dangerous materials would remain in the hands of criminals. "Assuming I believe you," Mitchell said carefully, "what would you need to mount a rescue operation?" Alexandra returned to the map and pointed to several locations. "A small team of specialists, equipment that won't be traced back to official sources, and complete operational autonomy. Most importantly, we would need to keep this off the books until the operatives are safely recovered. That's asking a lot. It's the only way that has a chance of working. The moment this operation appears in official channels, the people who want to protect this network will know about it. Your missing operatives will be dead within hours." Mitchell stood and joined her at the map. "How long would you need?" 72 hours from insertion to extraction, assuming everything goes according to plan, which it never does. "And if I can't provide the guarantees you want about your legal status?" Alexandra looked at him directly. "Then I disappear tonight and you never see Maria Santos again. You'll have to find another way to save your people." Mitchell knew she was serious. The woman standing before him had successfully hidden her identity for 18 months and could easily disappear again if she felt threatened. But he also sensed that she wanted to help, that the professional challenge and moral obligation were pulling her back toward the world she had tried to leave behind. "I need to make some calls," Mitchell said. "Can you give me 12 hours? "I can give you until tomorrow morning. After that, I have to assume that my cover is blown and act accordingly." Mitchell nodded and moved toward the door, then stopped. "One more question. The tattoo on your neck, what does it mean?" Alexandra smiled for the first time since revealing her identity. "It identifies me as a member of an elite extraction unit. The serpent represents stealth and patience. The dagger represents precision and decisiveness. The text is in an old Slavic dialect and roughly translates to, 'She who brings the lost home safely.' And have you? Brought people home safely? Until my last mission, I never lost anyone. That's why I'm willing to consider this operation. Your 3 operatives deserve someone who knows how to get the job done." After Alexandra left, Mitchell sat alone in the conference room for several minutes, staring at the map and considering his options. He was about to make decisions that could either save 3 lives or destroy his career. But looking at the red pins marking the last known positions of his missing people, Mitchell knew he didn't really have a choice. He picked up the secure phone and began making the most important calls of his military career. If Alexandra Petrov was willing to come out of hiding to save 3 American operatives, then he was going to make sure she had everything she needed to succeed. The alternative, leaving his people to die while protecting bureaucratic interests, was unthinkable. Within 6 hours, Mitchell had spoken with contacts at the Pentagon, the CIA, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. The conversations were careful and oblique, but the message was clear. He had found a potential solution to the crisis, but it would require flexibility and trust from the highest levels of government. By evening, Mitchell had received provisional approval for an off-the-books operation, with the understanding that success would bring recognition and failure would bring disavowal. It was exactly the kind of arrangement that Alexandra had warned him about, but it was also the only option available. Tomorrow morning he would meet with Alexandra and present his proposal. If she accepted, they would begin planning an operation that could either save 3 lives and expose a dangerous conspiracy, or get them all killed in the mountains of Eastern Europe. Either way, the days of Maria Santos quietly mopping floors at Fort Harrison were over. Alexandra arrived at the base the next morning carrying her cleaning supplies, but she knew it would be the last time she would need the disguise. She had spent the night preparing for either scenario, accepting Mitchell's offer and returning to operational status, or disappearing forever and starting over somewhere else. Both options required careful planning and absolute commitment. Mitchell was waiting for her in the same conference room where they had spoken the previous day. This time, however, he wasn't alone. A woman in civilian clothes sat at the table, studying a laptop computer with obvious expertise. She looked up when Alexandra entered, and there was immediate mutual recognition between two professionals who understood the nature of dangerous work. "Alexandra, this is Colonel Sarah Chen from the Defense Intelligence Agency," Mitchell said. "She's been helping with background verification and operational planning." Chen closed her laptop and extended her hand. "I've read your file. Impressive record, and I understand why you chose to disappear. The people you were investigating have been active since you left." Alexandra shook Chen's hand while analyzing this new development. Having a DIA officer involved suggested that Mitchell had been serious about his promises, but it also meant that more people knew about her situation. Every additional person who knew her location increased the risk of exposure. "What can you tell me about the current operation?" Alexandra asked, taking a seat across from them. Chen opened a secure briefcase and spread several documents across the table. The 3 missing operatives were part of a joint task force investigating arms trafficking networks in Eastern Europe. They weren't supposed to be doing anything dangerous, just gathering intelligence and identifying key players. "But they found something unexpected," Alexandra said. "Examining the photographs and maps, exactly. Their last communication indicated they had discovered evidence of strategic materials being moved through the network. Before they could report details, they went silent." Alexandra studied the intelligence reports, noting details that confirmed her suspicions about the scope of the operation. "This isn't just arms trafficking. Someone is using these networks to move materials that could be used for nuclear or chemical weapons." Mitchell leaned forward. "That's what we're afraid of. If these materials reach their intended destination, we could be looking at a terrorist attack that makes 9/11 look small." "And you think my missing people stumbled onto the shipping schedule or delivery routes?" "We think they're being kept alive because someone wants to know how much they learned and who they might have told," Chen said. "But that protection won't last long." Alexandra absorbed this information while calculating the tactical challenges. A simple personnel extraction had become a race against time to prevent a potential catastrophe. The stakes were higher than she had imagined, but that also meant the resources available for the operation might be more extensive. "What kind of support can you provide?" she asked. Mitchell slid another folder across the table. "Off-the-books funding, equipment that can't be traced to official sources, and a small team of specialists who have worked outside normal channels before. Most importantly, complete operational autonomy once you're in the field." Alexandra opened the folder and reviewed the personnel files. 3 operators with impressive credentials but complicated histories. The kind of people who were skilled enough for dangerous work, but expendable enough to be disavowed if necessary. It wasn't ideal, but it was workable. "Timeline?" she asked. 72 hours maximum, Chen said. "Intelligence suggests that your targets are being moved to a more secure location at the end of the week. After that, extraction becomes virtually impossible." Alexandra stood and walked to the wall map, studying the terrain and political boundaries. The target area was in a region she knew well, but 18 months away from operational status had left her somewhat out of touch with current local conditions. "I'll need updated intelligence on local assets, current security protocols, and recent changes in the criminal hierarchy," she said. "I'll also need guarantees about my legal status and protection from the people who wanted me dead." Mitchell and Chen exchanged glances before Chen spoke. "We can provide immunity for any actions taken during this operation, and we can arrange for official reinstatement under a protected identity. But we can't guarantee protection from all threats, because you still don't know who was protecting the network that tried to kill me." "Correct. This operation might help us identify those people, but it might also put you back on their radar." Alexandra considered this while staring at the map. She had spent 18 months in hiding, building a quiet life as Maria Santos and trying to forget the world of international intelligence. The offer to return was tempting, but it came with risks that could destroy the safety she had worked so hard to create. But looking at the photographs of the missing operatives, young men and women who reminded her of colleagues she had worked with and friends she had lost, Alexandra knew she couldn't walk away. These people were in danger because they had stumbled onto the same conspiracy that had nearly killed her. Abandoning them would mean letting the criminals win and potentially allowing a terrorist attack that could kill thousands. "I'll do it," she said, turning back to face Mitchell and Chen. "But I want complete operational control, no interference from Washington, and a promise that if this goes wrong, you'll make sure my real identity stays buried." "Agreed," Mitchell said immediately. Chen nodded more slowly. "The DIA will provide full support, but understand that success in this operation will make you valuable to people who might want to use your skills again. Returning to the intelligence community means giving up the quiet life you've built." Alexandra smiled grimly. "I gave up the quiet life the moment I decided to investigate that network 18 months ago. I've just been postponing the inevitable." Over the next several hours, they planned the operation in detail. Alexandra would lead a team into the target area under cover of a legitimate business operation. They would locate the missing operatives, gather intelligence about the strategic materials, and extract everyone before the criminals realized what was happening. The plan was complex and dangerous, requiring precise timing and flawless execution, but Alexandra had done similar operations before, and she was confident that it could work with the right support and preparation. As the planning session concluded, Mitchell walked Alexandra to the door. "Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back." Alexandra looked around the conference room where she had made the decision to end her life as Maria Santos.
I've been running for 18 months and it hasn't solved anything.
"The network is still operating, good people are still in danger, and the threat is getting worse. Maybe it's time to stop running and start fighting back. And if we can't protect you from the people who wanted you dead, then at least I'll go down doing something that matters instead of hiding in a janitor's closet." Alexandra straightened her shoulders and looked Mitchell directly in the eyes. "Besides, I'm very good at staying alive in hostile environments. It's what I was trained for." That evening, Alexandra returned to her small apartment one last time. She packed the few belongings that mattered to her and prepared to leave the life of Maria Santos behind forever. Tomorrow, she would become Alexandra Petrov again, with all the skills and dangers that identity entailed. As she looked around the simple space that had been her refuge for 6 months, Alexandra felt a mixture of relief and regret. She had tried to become ordinary, but the world kept pulling her back into extraordinary circumstances. Perhaps some people were destined to live in the shadows, moving between identities and missions, never finding the peace that normal life offered. But as she thought about the 3 missing operatives and the potential terrorist threat they had uncovered, Alexandra knew she was making the right choice. Tomorrow she would begin the most important mission of her career, one that could either save countless lives or get her killed in the mountains of Eastern Europe. Either way, it was better than spending the rest of her life wondering what might have happened if she had found the courage to act when it mattered most. 6 weeks later, Alexandra stood in Commander Mitchell's office wearing a crisp military uniform with new insignia, indicating her official rank as major in a classified unit. The mission to Eastern Europe had been a complete success. All 3 operatives had been recovered alive, and the intelligence they provided had led to the disruption of a major terrorist plot involving stolen nuclear materials. The operation had been everything Alexandra had expected and more. Dangerous moments when discovery seemed certain, complex negotiations with local criminal contacts, and a final extraction under fire that had tested every skill she possessed. But most importantly, it had worked. The missing operatives were safe, the terrorist network was broken, and the strategic materials were secured. "The debriefing reports make for interesting reading," Mitchell said, offering her a cup of coffee. "Apparently you managed to turn 3 of the network's key players into informants and gathered enough intelligence to keep multiple agencies busy for years." Alexandra accepted the coffee and sat in the chair where she had first revealed her true identity. The network was more extensive than anyone realized. We identified cells in 7 different countries and traced funding sources back to some very surprising places, including the corruption in our own intelligence community. That was the most important discovery. Alexandra's expression grew serious. "The investigation is ongoing, but we've identified at least 4 senior officials who were providing protection to the network in exchange for personal profit. Their arrests are being coordinated to prevent any of them from warning the others." Mitchell nodded with satisfaction. The conspiracy that had forced Alexandra into hiding was finally being exposed, and the people responsible would face justice. But more importantly, the threat they had been protecting was neutralized. "What about you?" Mitchell asked. "Chen tells me that Washington is very interested in your continued service." Alexandra smiled and walked to the window, looking out at the base where her new life had begun. "They've offered me command of a new unit specializing in deep cover operations and personnel extraction. Apparently my unique background and recent success have made me valuable again. And will you accept?" "I already have. It turns out that trying to live a normal life wasn't working for me. I kept finding excuses to get involved in situations that required my particular skills." Alexandra turned back to Mitchell. "Besides, there are other networks out there, other threats that need to be addressed. The work I started 18 months ago isn't finished." Mitchell stood and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Major Petrov. I think you'll find this assignment more satisfying than mopping floors." Alexandra shook his hand with a genuine smile. "Thank you for taking the risk to trust me. A lot of people are alive today because you were willing to look beyond appearances and see what was really there." "Speaking of appearances," Mitchell said, "I have to ask about something that's been bothering me. How did you maintain that cleaning woman persona so convincingly? You completely transformed yourself." "Years of training in deep cover operations," Alexandra explained. "But also I was genuinely trying to disappear into that role. Part of me wanted to believe that I could become Maria Santos permanently and leave all the danger and complexity behind." "Any regrets about giving up that life?" Alexandra considered the question while looking around the office where her transformation had taken place. "Maria Santos was safe and anonymous, but she wasn't real. She was a character I was playing, a role that became more comfortable the longer I stayed in it. But I was never meant to be invisible forever. The tattoo on your neck, you kept it covered for 6 months. Weren't you tempted to have it removed?" Alexandra unconsciously touched her neck, where the small tattoo was now visible above her uniform collar. "I thought about it many times, but removing it would have meant accepting that my previous life was completely over, that all the training and experience and sacrifice had been for nothing. In the end, I couldn't do it. Because you knew you'd need those skills again? Because those skills are part of who I am. I tried to deny it. But the mission in Eastern Europe reminded me that some people are called to do difficult work in dangerous places. Running away from that calling doesn't make it disappear." Later that afternoon, Alexandra walked through the base one final time before departing for her new assignment. She passed the areas where she had worked as Maria Santos, remembering the long hours spent mopping floors and emptying trash bins while hiding her true identity from everyone around her. She encountered some of the cleaning staff who had worked alongside Maria Santos. They smiled and waved, recognizing her face but confused by her military uniform. Alexandra waved back, knowing they would never understand the transformation they were witnessing. In the administration building, she stopped at the window she had cleaned dozens of times as Maria. Looking through the glass, she could see the parking lot where Commander Mitchell had first begun to suspect that she was more than she appeared. It seemed like a lifetime ago, though only 6 weeks had passed. Alexandra's new assignment would take her to Washington, where she would build and lead a team of specialists in covert operations. The work would be dangerous and demanding, but it would also be meaningful. Instead of hiding from her past, she would be using her experience to protect others and serve her country. As she prepared to leave the base, Alexandra reflected on the strange journey that had brought her from international operative to cleaning woman to military officer. Each phase had taught her something important about herself and about the balance between safety and purpose. Maria Santos had given her refuge when she needed to disappear, but Alexandra Petrov was who she really was. The tattoo on her neck told the story of her true identity, someone who brought lost people home safely, someone who faced danger to protect others, someone who couldn't ignore injustice even when it put her own life at risk. The mission in Eastern Europe had proven that she could still do the work, that 18 months in hiding hadn't diminished her skills or her commitment. More importantly, it had shown her that trying to escape her calling had been pointless. She was meant to operate in the shadows, to go places others couldn't go, to solve problems that had no conventional solutions. 6 months ago, Alexandra had believed that her career was over and her life was in danger. She had hidden behind the identity of an ordinary cleaning woman, hoping to find peace in anonymity. But peace wasn't what she had found at Fort Harrison. Instead, she had found purpose and the courage to reclaim her true identity. Now, as Major Alexandra Petrov prepared to begin a new chapter of her career, she carried with her the lessons learned during her time as Maria Santos. She understood the value of patience, the importance of observation, and the power of being underestimated. These insights would make her a better leader and a more effective operative. The woman who had once pushed a mop bucket through military corridors was gone, but she had served her purpose. She had kept Alexandra Petrov safe until the moment came to emerge from hiding and return to the work that defined her. In the end, the most ordinary disguise had hidden an extraordinary person who was destined to do extraordinary things. As Alexandra walked toward her car for the last time, she thought about the 3 operatives whose lives had been saved by the mission. They would return to their families, their careers, and their normal lives, never knowing that their rescue had been made possible by a woman who had once cleaned floors in the same building where their fate was decided. It was a reminder that important work often happened in unexpected ways, carried out by people who remained invisible until the moment their skills were desperately needed. Alexandra had learned to appreciate both sides of that equation, the value of hiding in plain sight and the importance of stepping forward when called upon to serve.